What's up guys, Rack here. Today I'm going to show y'all a couple tips and plugins that I use to make my drums a little bit meatier. So let's get started. So the first thing that I've seen and I've done myself is sidechaining the kicks over the hi-hats just a little bit to give it a little bit more bite. And plus when everything's crushed to the max, which is usually how dubstep is, then it makes the drums thump just a little bit harder since the kick cuts through a little bit more. And the way I do it is using the stock Ableton compressor, and I just drag that onto the hat group or the top group and then use the built-in sidechain feature and then just turn it on, make your input the kick wherever that is, and then I turn on the EQ since it dials down the ducking a little bit better and makes it a little bit cleaner, and then I flip it to that setting there. I think I put the frequency around 300 hertz, so it keeps it fluid, the ducking. Turn the ratio up all the way just to keep it really hard. Cat back there. And then the attack, bring that down usually a lot. Sometimes I dial it in, sometimes I just drop it all the way down. And then the release really doesn't sound bad the way it is default, but you can always mess with the auto on and off. Sometimes it actually sounds pretty decent and pretty solid. And once you have that in there with the threshold, you really want to be subtle with it. You're not going to be crushing the kick, so when it's coming in, it's completely stomping out the hat. You want just a little bit of bite. So I start off with literally just minus 1.5 decibels, and then I usually try not to go past 5 or 6. So the max I'll usually go is -6 or -5, and then go from there and solo out the drums and the hats so you can hear what it's actually doing. It's really subtle. I have it right here already, and then I'll take that out of there so I'm not doubling it up, just so you can see what it's doing. So if I play the drums with the hats, I'll play it without it first and then I'll add it on there right after. So here's what it sounds like, just regular, no side chaining on the hats. So I mean, it's not bad, but let's see if you can notice the difference between with the sidechain versus without it. So now this is with the Ableton stock compressor sidechaining the hats with the kick. So it's really subtle. If you don't have headphones on, you probably didn't even hear the difference, but overall in the mix, that's going to clean things up a little bit so you don't have that harsh high end constantly hitting, and it gives, I don't know, it kind of gives you that little bit of a groove from the way that it smacks that way. And if you like to hear it further, if you solo it out and then you on off the compressor, then you can really hear the A and B comparison. So here, I'll play that for you real quick. So without it, now with it, so it's just on the one every time. It slightly ducks it. Now I have it routed to the kick. When the kicks and the claps are layered, I have my kicks turned down a little bit, so that's going to reflect in the amount of sidechain, but I kind of like it that way. I don't want it sidechain too hard when the kick and the clap are playing with the hats, because when you have a little bit more of that high end, it gives you that cha, if you know what I'm talking about. All right, the next thing I'm going to show y'all is a plugin. Actually, it's from Kilohertz. It's called Transient Shaper. So on my drum group, where I have all the kicks and the claps and snares and whatnot, on the group I have a transient shaper right after an EQ after a low cut, and I have it doing a bit of work, not gonna lie, but usually you want to be kind of subtle with it unless you're able to pull off pushing the attack a little bit. And what it's basically doing is, as it says right there, it amplifies the attenuation of the transient. What it basically translates to is a drum smacking harder. So if you turn up the attack, it gives more bite at the start of the sound, and then sustain. If you turn that up, then it's gonna let your claps, your kicks kind of play out a little bit longer. So that's kind of like the release. If you dial it in a little bit, it keeps the drums a little tighter, and then with the attack, it just gives it more thump. The pump As you can see what it's doing to the waveform right there, it kind of adds a duck after the initial transient hit, and that kind of messes up the sound for me sometimes, so I try to use that sparingly. But everything else I tend to leave the same, and I usually check with the clip on and off to see if it sounds better or worse with that. But I just left it off on this one, left the speed where it's supposed to be, and then just so you can A/B it. It's a pretty big difference. You might not need headphones for this one, but I'll play it back for you real quick. So first without it. All right, now with it. When you're soloing the groups, it's a little bit harder to pick out what it's doing, but once you have everything together with your synths, your sub, all your effects and whatnot, it'll really give them the little bit of edge they need to stick out or pop out of the mix. The third thing I'd say, or the best thing that I see has the biggest effect to make the drums really punch through and shine, is having a good sidechain. So you saw the sidechain on the hats, but I'm talking about the sidechain on pretty much everything else, mainly your mids group, or where all your basses and all your sounds are. We're gonna have a little bit of sidechainception going on here. This tends to happen a lot in dubstep, at least. So the plugin I'll recommend for it is SHAPERBOX. It actually used to be called Volume Shaper when I used it originally, but SHAPERBOX is what it is now. And they basically have a number of different plugins in here that you can choose from. The only one I have or own is Volume Shaper. That's the only one I tend to use. Once you have it, or if you have it, this is what it'll look like, and you basically draw in the shape of the volume cut that you want. Obviously this is a really harsh long cut. You can draw in however long you want it to duck, versus using the compressor through Ableton. This just gives you complete control over how much of the drums you want to cut through. If I play it without it, I'll turn on the mids group so you can hear what's actually going on. So I'll turn it off and then turn it back on just so you can hear. So you can really hear the difference. I know the last couple of things you might not have heard it, especially if you didn't have headphones on, but this is one's really hard to miss. So one time with it on. Clearly everything's clashing when it's off, but when it's on, it's basically completely ducking out the mids group. So you can actually see every time that the SHAPERBOX is triggered, you'll see the actual waveform come through, and then that first part being ducked out. And the way I usually set it up is with a harsher sidechain. I can show you what it'll look like. If you have a less of a sidechain, you'll have a direct impact on it. So if I drag this back, this is how quickly the volume's gonna come back up. Some people like that sound, but I just personally like a fat sidechain just because it gives you that thump. The way I route the volume shaper, or the way you get it to work, is the way, or at least the way I do it, is I change the length to a quarter note, and then I turn the MIDI trigger on to one shot. What that basically allows you to do is, if you're in Ableton, you just hit Control Shift T or Command Shift T if you're on a Mac to make a MIDI track. The way you route it is you go into the output, whatever group you put that sidechain on, you click on that. So obviously the mid group is what I had it on, and then after you've selected that, you'll get, if you have other plugins that can trigger or have MIDI capabilities, then you'll see them pop up, but you want to click on SHAPERBOX too. So after you got it selected, just insert a MIDI clip. After you have a MIDI clip, every note you put in here is going to be the sidechain trigger. So you just want to follow your drums and sidechain them wherever you want. I actually also have sidechain on the pre-drop, so before the drums are even playing, just to give it that duck before the drums actually come in. You can do that as well. All these notes here are when the sidechain's triggered. There's other features you can use in here I don't really use a lot. Like they have a built-in compressor. Don't really use that. You can control the mix amount of the sidechain. So if you wanted to be, if you wanted to have less of a sidechain effect, you could dial it in. There's also presets in there too. If you don't know what to do, then they give you a starting point and you can always work from there. Other than that, the only thing I can give you guys as like a bonus tip is on your sub. If you're really pushing your song, putting the sidechain on the sub is not a bad idea. So I have really similar shape there, and that's going to give the kick more space and it won't give you that distortion, especially if everything's crushed to the brim. So I'll play it back for you with the sidechain on and off on the sub so you can hear a little bit of the difference as well. So you can hear that low end is distorting a little bit. So when I cut it out and give the kick all that space, it clears it up. So a quick tip there, same plugin, different track that you're putting it on, but it really has a big effect on the overall mix. The last thing, if it were to be a last thing, just to throw it in the video, is keep things simple. You don't really have to overdo it. If you have quality samples, and there's going to be no need to process the shit out of them. So as you can see on the drums, I don't have anything going on. There's just clean samples. So on the kick, just to show you, if you guys were wondering, on the kick, there's literally just a Pro Q EQ with a punch and click preset. And this just gives it a little bit more of a punchier, clubby type sound. And I brought the mix down to 21% just so it's not super drastic, but it makes the kick kind of sit better in the mix rather than just being dropped in there. And of course the good old OTT on there. I've seen on Subtronic's live stream that he had OTT on his kick. Never really did it before, but after I tried it, didn't sound terrible. I have it on a 8% dry, wet, or depth, and that does just enough. And then on the group, you guys already saw there's just an EQ to prevent the kick or just the low end in general from clashing with the sub. Dial that in to 47 hertz. You kind of want to find where that exact point is before it starts distorting, and then a limiter on here, not push at all, but just to catch it before it goes into the red. On the claps, on the main snare, there's just a EQ to cut out the low end, some reverb with the chain. So I have my dry signal there, wet signal here with the reverb maxed out, and then OTT on the end just to really squash that reverb, make it sound extra wet. And then these two claps literally have nothing on them. These are more of like the harsher hitting claps. And then this is the washed out clap. So I'm paying these harder ones to the right and to the left, so they're both filling out that space. And then that reverb one just kept in the middle. And then when they're all played together, the kicks turn down -1.5 decibels. So it gives it a little bit more space for that bite to come through with the hats. But as you can see, there's not a whole lot going on. It's pretty basic stuff. I've noticed over the years of producing that really the simple stuff is what sounds better. Overdoing it, overcomplicating things really is just kind of make things a little harder to clean up. So keep things simple. That's pretty much it though. If you guys got any value out of this video, let me know. Hit that thumbs up button if you want to help me out, just so people can see this video. And if you want more videos like this, just hit the subscribe button, and then I'll be sure to make more things to give you guys any tips or insight on what I do. And yeah, other than that, peace out. See you next time.